make sure that we're capturing everyone who's attending. Without further ado, I am going to kick this over to Scott Oshima. Welcome, Scott.
Wait. There we go. Okay. Oh, wait. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Good morning. It's so nice to see you all. I'm going to do my proper opener now that I've gotten my own tech right. Okay, here we go. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Oshima. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I'm here to share my personal story about how 3 unlikely nonprofits came together to become the legendary cross-sector throuple that is Sustainable Little Tokyo. I'm going to share a little bit about sort of our loving journey together as nonprofit partners, and I'll open up a little bit of time after for some Q&A. If folks have any questions during the presentation, obviously, please put it in the chat. And then when we get to the little Q&A section, please, unmute and say hello. I'd love to see your faces and hear from you, but also it's okay if you're shy, just put it in the chat. So here we go. We're gonna do a little presentation, a little Q&A, and then we'll have some time to do breakout groups to do some group counseling for your relationships with your partners. So I wanted to, really start off by, so I am the Sustainable Little Tokyo Program Director, housed at the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center. But really, we are a cross-sector throuple. So we are a coalition of 3 organizations that really came together to become Sustainable Little Tokyo. Oh! But more than, these 3 organizations, which I'll share a little bit about each of their stories. We are, people. And so I wanted to, they're not here, although they really wanted to be here. But some of the lead staff in this partnership are Kristen Fukushima at Little Tokyo Community Council and Grant Sanu at Little Tokyo Service Center. And then of course me, as well as many of our other obviously staff, but these are the core organizational leadership team. And we really are, more than organizational partners, we are really friends who've been working together for over 4 years. So we're, super excited for this long time relationship. Yes, I know. so I, thought that I could share a little bit about the secret to our successful partnership with my patented 5 stages of a loving partnership. So let's talk about romance. Yes, romance. Oh, I know, thank you. So before, before we became this power throuple, and I hope you, just like this, you should have seen what I had to type into the stock image search. I was like, before we became this power throuple, we were 3 very independent and unique individuals. So I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about where I work, the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center. And you'll hear that, because we know each other so well, we call each other by affectionate terms like JACCC and LTCC and LTSC, sweet little pet names. So JACCC is a 50-year-old lover of arts and culture, for Japanese and Japanese American arts and culture, both traditional and contemporary, and is truly the love child of community activists who are fighting for a permanent home for our culture and community here in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles on Tongva and Chumash land. So this is right behind me, our campus. This is normally where I would be in my office, but instead I'm in my bedroom. Then we have Little Tokyo Community Council, which is a much younger nonprofit in our relationship. It's barely 21 years old, but is a powerful advocate and a very strong voice fighting for the future of Little Tokyo as a historic Japantown, and really only one of 3 remaining historic Japantowns left in the entire nation. And then we have Little Tokyo Service Center. This is their home, their offices in Kasahewa, which is an affordable family housing. Little Tokyo Service Center is just over 40 years old, about 42 now, and is a community developer who really began their youth as a community activist, especially during a lot of the displacement in the 1970s and 80s, the same time that JACCC was founded, and it began really trying to create culturally relevant social services for Japanese American seniors in Little Tokyo, and then really eventually became a community developer, building and advocating for affordable housing across LA. And so these 3 organizations, we all, are long time in the Little Tokyo community, and, had dated a little bit here and there. We all trusted each other. We all got along, but it really wasn't until 2013 that we worked on a big project together. We started to get a little bit serious and think about, do we want to be together? So we first partnered and started Sustainable Little Tokyo. So Sustainable Little Tokyo behind me, this is Little Tokyo. Our community, led by many organizations in the neighborhood, wanted to create a vision for how we wanted to grow that would maintain our history and our cultural roots as not only a historic Japantown, but a historic community of color. And in part because of this big metro station right here that's under construction, we knew that it was potentially could drastically shift the future of our neighborhood and could erase a lot of our community. So we created this vision, which includes affordable housing, affordable commercial space, arts and cultural space, and open and green space, which was very little of in downtown. And I'm going to share a little bit, some updates about this land called First Street North for folks. But before we get there, so we started really, partnering, working together, doing community engagement to create this vision for our neighborhood. And then, we really decided that we wanted to take things a little bit more seriously. At that time, Sustainable Little Tokyo was primarily run by Little Tokyo Community Council and Little Tokyo Service Center, but there was a very strong interest in arts-based strategies and really incorporating arts and culture into this work, advocating for equitable development in the neighborhood and strength and growth in our community for the future. And so this couple, LTCC and LTSC, decided to open up their relationship, which is now where we come to reality check. You had a little honeymoon, you had a fun little vacation, we created this vision together, but now things are starting to get a little bit serious and a little bit complicated. Unsure of the direction of where we were going, LTSC and LTCC decided to open up the relationship and add JACCC, the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, to really focus on arts and culture. and to bring artists into the lead of this work. And so that's where I work, and I have a background in both as an artist and as a community organizer. So kind of really this crossroads of organizing and arts and community arts. And so at that time, it was complicated. We had all just, started to get to know each other. This is 2015. We formalized this thruple partnership between these three organizations, and it was a little bit tough. I came on in 2017. We had new staff. Grant started a couple of days after me, and Kristen at LTCC had just transitioned to a staff position with the community council. And so it was a little bit rocky, and there was sometimes some confusion about who does what, how we make decisions. Little Tokyo Service Center was developing an artist residency, and it was unclear, who needs to be a part of that, who's a part of the development, who's a part of creating work like this when it is under the umbrella of our relationship, Sustainable Little Tokyo. And so it is sometimes a little bit complicated, but we decided that one way to really push through these difficult times and confusion and malaise was to really commit to each other. Commitment. So we really put a ring on it. Aww. Yes, I know, it's so sweet. So we put a ring on it with, a very sexy document of cooperation. Where we really, had to really figure out, how do we have these conversations? They're kind of awkward. We really like each other as people, but we don't really know how to make decisions together as a group. Who's involved? There's 3 of us. How do we have these conversations? When do we talk about projects and things that we would like to do together? So we decided to really formalize it, to just say, hey, let's clear out the confusion. This doesn't mean that we aren't collaborative, that we aren't flexible and responsive, but hey, let's have some ground rules as a throuple. And so we created this sexy document. And through it, it made a lot of communications and made a lot of our decision-making much easier. We laid out processes. In the case of a project that is affecting the neighborhood as a whole, or altering our community vision, our shared vision of our future together, then we would make sure that we were bringing each other in together. If we wanted to do a project and take a lead on it, like JACCC wants to do an art project, we can take a lead on it under the umbrella of our relationship, Sustainable Little Tokyo. But keep people in the loop, because we have a lot of incredible expertise together between these 3 organizations. And through this kind of commitment, lasting commitment, we've had some incredible memories together. Oh, yes, I know. We made music together. This is Fandango Bon, a annual festival bringing together our Japanese, Mexican, African, and Muslim American communities, sharing our traditional practices of circle dance and music and environmental sustainability practices that are really rooted in our communities. We created projects like Shoto for Little Tokyo, where out of the artist residency program, one of the artists in residence, Kuni Yoshida, eventually developed an ongoing weekly senior calligraphy program that both teaches traditional Japanese calligraphy and is a way to get seniors involved and feel like they have a place to share their voice as residents in the neighborhood. We created the Windows of Little Tokyo, which commissioned artists to create 10 unique window artworks, temporary window artworks all across our neighborhood, sharing our past, present, and future in the community, and also uplifting different businesses and organizations in the neighborhood and getting people to move around the community. And even environmental practices like bokashi composting, which is an Okinawan tradition of composting using this anaerobic process that allows you to compost meat and dairy and do it in your home in a bucket. And then really incredible fun projects like a takeover of an unused storefront to create temporarily a vision for what kinds of arts and cultural spaces our community and our artists really need. And this was really, all of this work is driven by community and community committees and volunteers and people who love the neighborhood. And, you know, we oftentimes will dance together. So this is actually the opening of that space with the infamous punk rock legend Atomic Nancy spinning vinyl. So a lot of joy, a lot of memories, a lot of music together as a cross-sector throuple. But then, you know, we realized that, like, suddenly, you know, we had all these plans working together in 2019. And as we rolled into 2020, of course, we hit crisis. So yes, many relationships. You'll hit some bumps in the road, but sometimes they're not, you know, usually those bumps are not quite as terrifying as a worldwide pandemic. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard to get through crisis, especially when it obviously so deeply impacts the work that we do together. We could no longer be together in person. We could no longer gather our community together to have, you know, really meaningful community engagement. We couldn't have our in-person programs, and a lot was changing. Just before the pandemic, our organizations had a major shift in leadership. JACCC had a full year with an interim CEO before bringing in a brand new CEO, Patricia Wyatt. And Little Tokyo Service Center had a really, truly devastating loss. Dean Matsubayashi passed away, and then had it was the executive director. And then you know, we brought in they brought up Eric Nakano as the new ED. And so we were at this total moment of like, okay, we just had this major transition in organizational leadership. And as we were just shaken and trying to figure out, you know, what does this mean for us as a couple, throuple? You know, we really realized the importance of things like the document of cooperation. And we're actually in the process of updating that because so much has changed. And we realized that, yes, you know, we have been working together so beautifully, so wonderfully as a team for 4 years. But what happens if one of us leaves? You know, what happens in the case that new leadership comes in and they don't really understand the importance of this kind of partnership and this kind of initiative? So we really wanted to formalize exactly what it is that we do and how we share our resources and expertise as very different individuals, as a arts and cultural, or sorry, an artist, as a community advocate and activist, and as a community developer. These three very unique individuals, they're really contributing together all of their knowledge and skills to make this kind of work so successful. And we wanted that to really carry on into the future. And so we are currently in the process of updating that document of cooperations in the hope that if any of us move on from this throuple, which I really hope we never do because we all love each other, that the work will carry on. We also, of course, were hit by the pandemic. And so right after this major transition, you know, we all went into shutdown. And all of our programs, you know, in-person programs were canceled. We had to quickly shift gear to nonstop Zoom meetings. And we had to really think through, you know, what were our capacities. Like, we are all very stressed out. We're all dealing with really difficult situation. But we really wanted to continue the work, and especially serving our residents and senior residents who we knew were going to be facing really intense social isolation. And so what we did, you know, and this is, you know, my advice to you as part of these 5 stages, is we just communicated. For example, you know, we have youth art workshops with our Casa Hewa, which is the family affordable housing in the neighborhood. But we knew, like, in the middle of the pandemic, Little Tokyo Service Center's youth service coordinator, the person who is primarily in charge of helping us, you know, work with the youth, left. And so we knew that the resident services department was understaffed, and we worried like, oh, we want to continue these art programs, but we don't want to put added burden on resident services, on the social workers who are right now just trying to make sure that the residents stay housed and have food and are safe and healthy. So we just, tried to be as mindful and caring and thoughtful as possible, and approached, the director of resident services at LTSC and said, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? We know this is really tough, and we would love to continue these programs, but we totally understand if things are really rough right now and we need to put things on pause. And, we were really surprised, actually. They were like, oh no, we're understaffed. We want these programs for the youth. And like, if you're able to actually implement these programs and coordinate them and bring in the teaching artists, then that is actually such a lift off of our shoulders. And it was actually very surprising. I thought, oh, wow, like actually we can be really helpful in these moments and providing these programs and services that are not only to, provide fun outlets of creativity for the residents, but a way for the residents to feel included in the community and really, rise as leaders in the neighborhood and imagining the future for our Japantown. And then even things like the senior programs, we had to completely transition similarly, obviously to remote with mailed in artwork. But through these really intense challenges, we were able to really recover as a throuple. And so we made it. We made it through. We're still making it through. It's not over yet, obviously. But as I mentioned, the youth art workshops, we transitioned fully virtual with the help of the staff at LTSC to deliver activity kits to the kids and continue doing workshops over Zoom with children, which is wild. And really continuing to collect their input and their imaginings of what kind of community they want to live in, and making sure that our residents in Kasahela, who are majority Latinx, actually, feel like they really are a part of Little Tokyo. That is, even though we're a historic Japantown, we've never only been Japanese American. And so how can we really make sure this is a place of belonging for all community, including the people who live here? And we completely transitioned, the Shoto calligraphy program to remote, doing mailable activities that the seniors could do and then mail back to us. At the beginning of the pandemic, we said, use whatever materials you have at home. If you have a brush, if you you can even use a hair tie and just dip it into ink and then use that as a brush. You can use paint if you have it. You can use black tea or coffee or red wine. I don't have a photo of it, but one of the artworks that they created, someone made it out of ketchup. So really, this crisis is often an opportunity to be really creative and to grow together as a partner, and to respond to crisis in a collaborative way, and in a way that we were really listening to each other. We were trying to look out for each other. We were trying not to make assumptions and just ask questions about how they were doing, if they're willing, if we are all able to carry on this work together. And so, yeah, it's, we have even encountered, major changes in our fight for this public land. So these are the vision is for what we want built on 3 pieces of publicly owned land. And we had this First Street North parcel. Our council member made a motion that would mean that we could take over and lease a large chunk of this block, which is amazing news. But we have a very short timeline. We have less than a month to get a whole site plan, a whole plan for what this development would look like in a month. And when we had planned, thinking that we would have like 6 months to a year to update this vision and really make sure that it still reflects what the community wants. And we encountered difficult tension where Little Tokyo Service Center's architects and planners were like, we gotta go. They wanted to rush things, but JACCC and LTCC wanted to take it slow. We just want, but really, it became, we just had to talk this through. We feel like we have to slow things down in order to properly bring in our whole family, the whole community, to make sure that they get their voices into this at a time during a pandemic when it's really difficult. And so we just had to have conversations and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm worried about. I'm worried that, our values of inclusion and equity are not, we don't, how do we do this the best that we can, knowing that we have such a short amount of time? And how do we do this together instead of separately doing our own things and things not lining up? So this is actually what we are currently in the middle of. But really, to come back, it's really, it really is about, love. And it really is about these conversations and really talking things through and being honest about your concerns, about what you're going through, about what you're able to do and not able to do, and how do we do this work together. And so it is through these 5 stages, through just sharing a personal story that is very specific to our throuple, Sustainable Little Tokyo. But really, I hope you can take away a lot of lessons from this story about how we formed, how we founded, how we fell in love, and how we realized the reality of what a long time partnership really looks like, and formalized a real commitment to each other, and faced crisis, really, really intense, probably the biggest crisis we faced in a century. And then really came back together and recovered, and hopefully will emerge out of this crisis all the stronger. But really, it isn't just about these 3 lead staff. Obviously, I mentioned we have a whole team. I have staff Alma and Amy at JACCC, as well as all of my other coworkers. But really, it's a family. This is a photo of one of our retreats in the before times when we were together, bringing in a lot of our major stakeholders and committee chairs to talk about, how are we doing? This is a much larger family. And through this kind of partnership, we have these 3 organizations, as well as hundreds of community members and other partner organizations, have built together a movement, one that has all, we within our community have all the skills that we need to do this work. And we just had to find each other. So we have, JACCC, an arts organization, Little Tokyo Community Council, an advocacy nonprofit, and Little Tokyo Service Center as a developer, really working all together. And so really, we have created a movement that, I feel so, lucky to be a part of. This is an image from when we all walked in Nisei Week Parade to draw attention to First Street North. And this is, now, as I mentioned, we're finally may get that land, may be able to control what's built on that land in a way that really honors and reflects the history of this community and the decades of advocacy and fighting that we've been doing. And I wanted to share one thing. We've been, Sustainable Little Tokyo has existed since 2013. This particular partnership, between the 3 organizations, formed in 2015. So, we were about 6 years, and and the 3, Kristen, Grant, and I, have been working together as the core team since 2017. So we've been working together for 4 years together. And but there's, in traditional Japanese art, there is this idea that, if you ask, for example, a master shoto calligraphy artist, how long have they been doing calligraphy? They'll say, 1,000 years. They'll say, oh, it's, and you'll be like, what? You're like 50. But they'll say, no, I learned from this person who learned from this person. I'm a part of a legacy. And so while, our relationship, has only been 4 years, sometimes I like to say, well, we've been doing this for 137 years, since the founding of Little Tokyo. This relationship, this fight, this movement, this work is, over a century old, and we're just continuing it. So that is Sustainable Little Tokyo. I wanted to share some, little takeaways from these 5 stages. I couldn't decide. I was like, do I keep it in the performance or do I like put the like real tangible things? I don't know. I just kept it in the performance. But oh no, and I'm realizing I can't read backwards. But anyway, romance, really, these are some of my takeaways, I think, from this experience and this partnership is really, at the beginning, it's really about getting to know each other and, not just as organizations and what your values are as organizations or groups or people working together, but really getting to know each other as people, as individuals. I'm really not kidding. Like Kristen, Grant, and I, and our whole staff and team are like a family. Whenever we're invited to speak at things, it's just like 3 hooligans that are just like laughing with each other. And that's like the most ideal kind of relationship, right? Your partners and your friends. But of course, you don't have to be friends, but it helps to just like have a trusting relationship and learn each other's communication styles and to work together on a project, do something together to get to know each other. That's oftentimes the best way to learn about one another's orgs or groups or values, is just to do work together. The reality is that partnerships are difficult and messy and complicated, and there's ways to kind of scaffold it. There's ways to prepare yourself for that, and so that is. I'm trying to read this backwards now. You really like if once again, if your values and where you're going and if you have a shared vision of what you want to do together, then it'll work out. And so I put it's about shared values, or as one of my teachers once said, finding out where your perversities align. so we're all weird. But where are the places that we can work together? And then commitment, right? You don't have to get married, but maybe you want like an MOU. Like maybe you don't, or you want a document of cooperation, right? That's not legally binding. It's not marriage. It's just saying, here's what I'm going to commit to do. Here's what you'll do. Here's how we'll make decisions together. Here's how we work together. And that kind of commitment and just formalizing it so that you have something to return to when you get in a fight is really helpful. And with crisis, which we're all in the middle of, we have not come out of it yet, it is about just caring for one another and, remembering that as stressed out as we all are, we're people, that we need to communicate, we need to listen, we need to check in with each other and really just care for each other, not just as an organization, not we all have expectations of one another. So just keep them in check and talk to one another about how you'll get through this, how you'll get through conflict. And then of course, recovery, right? So this is actually crisis is an opportunity to really grow together. And I think, something date nights help, we really miss as partners, just like hanging out after a community meeting and just talking things. We don't have that opportunity anymore in virtual space. So we started to just like hold little virtual happy hours or just opportunities to just talk to each other as people, not just about work. So that also, I think, is a takeaway through all of our lessons. Yeah, I want to, before we jump into, I forgot this last, the power couple that is Sustainable Little Tokyo. Oh, thank you. It's, thank you. Oh, it's like you're all here with me. It's amazing. Oh, thank you. Oh, I started it again. Oh, I need more. So, with that is my presentation on the Wendy Williams show. Sharing the 5 stages of a loving partnership. Thank you so much. We wanted to open up some time for Q&A. So, if you have any questions about any of the story I shared, please type it in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself and just talk. We would love to see your faces, say hello. And then, in about, we'll have just a little bit of time for questions, and then we'll go into some breakout rooms to have some group counseling, group partnership counseling.
Well, I have a question, Scott.
Sure.
So you talked about all of these wonderful things that, happen in a relationship. One thing you didn't touch on, though, and this is where it can get really complicated and really just ruin the love, is about how you managed your financial relationship.
Yes, of course. So money. Yes, you're right. Money is a big, it really, hello, let me turn my Wendy Williams background again. Yes, money. Yes, it becomes very complicated, especially, in the case where, we were so lucky, after a lot of these years of work to receive a major grant from the Kresge Foundation. And JACCC, right, is the home, it's the home base for Sustainable Little Tokyo. So we, are the fiscal receiver. We manage the budget. I'm the primary staff that directs the initiative and oversees the coalition and our partnership. And then obviously also works with artists and oversees the dozen different projects and programs that we run. But yeah, all of a sudden we had a $500,000 grant across 2 years, and it was like, whoa, we were like, wow, that's a lot of incredible resources to really continue our work. Although we lost, a whole year in the pandemic. But it was like, that's a lot of money for us as 3 organizations to decide together. And I will be super transparent and honest in saying we got this opportunity to apply for this grant through Kresge, and we had very little time. So we had one quick meeting with all the 3 staff and said, hey, we've been invited. This is how much money they're offering us. This is what we're thinking. Tell us everything that they would like to see in the budget together collaboratively. But we only had 1 meeting. We had to quickly really do it, just put it all together, get all the notes, submit a budget, and then we received it. Luckily, Kresge, and we've been really lucky that many of the foundations like Mellon Foundation as well, and we're very flexible with how we decided. They trusted us and how we decided to use our money. So we knew that we would push this budget, we would get it, and then we would have a chance to alter it and work together. But by the time we received it, we were so busy. I think so much was happening, so much chaos, new leadership. It was in that moment. We got some backlash. Because we're not just 3 organizations, we're a larger community initiative, and people said, whoa, you got this major grant, where's that money going? There's no transparency. How did you make those decisions? From the community. And so we were like, oh wow, we made a misstep. We should have gone back first to the partners immediately to say, here's the budget, what do we need to adjust, right? So we, in hearing that, went to them and said, okay, here's the budget, here's the full budget, you let us know, review it, let us know how we want to disperse this money across the partnership, and honestly, the 2 partner organizations, LTSC and LTCC, were like, no, we looked at the budget, we trust your decision making, we trust that this work is really committed to this partnership and initiative and these programs and pushing it. So there weren't really any changes, but then we had to get in front of community and say, this is why we made those decisions, and we made a mistake that we didn't get in front. We don't need to share the whole budget, but at least tell them where the money is going, because it's a community initiative. So that, I hope that partly answers your question, but yeah, it's really about digging in, and we had to sit down and say, hey, Little Tokyo Service Center, what kinds of funds do you need to continue this work together? And they were like, oh, we don't know. And we're like, okay, well, we know. Resident services, social workers, we need to send money to their department because they reach out, they do all the outreach with our residents, right? So we knew we have to send money to support and resource all of the different departments of our in this partnership, in this coalition. So I would say that we I think we're a little bit lucky in that there is a lot of trust. So we do try to do these annual check-ins, annual retreats to really review progress, really, see where the money is going and how it's being used, reflect on it. So we do also have these sort of points of evaluation, not just with the partnership, but with the broader community.
Mary put a question in the chat. Scott, would you be comfortable sharing the process of developing and signing the putting on a ring phase?
It was very, so there was, before I came on board, there was, an initial draft of the document of cooperation, and there was a decision to kind of make it a DOC instead of a sort of legally binding MOU. Because we wanted flexibility. We wanted, this is a partnership that's about meaningful collaboration, not about like holding each other like legally accountable. And so, what we did is we, initially just kind of laid out the history of what this initiative is, to just lay out the background. How did this come about? How did this partnership begin? So some of it was just like really being very clear about the background. And then we just talked through like, what are each of our roles and expertise, and what are we willing to and able to commit to this work? Are we all three, we're going to commit staff time. We're going to commit to leveraging, our visibility as organizations and marketing and outreach efforts. We're going to commit our resources within our fields of expertise. We are going to commit to fundraising together to pay for this work. All of us, not just JACCC as the fiscal receiver. So we kind of talked through those roles and responsibilities and just outlined them. And then, because, as I mentioned in the sort of reality check, right, of like, oh, sometimes we don't know how to make decisions. We never really talked about that. We actually talked together and said like, hey, under what circumstances do we have to get approval from this coalition? And under what circumstances can we take a lead and just make sure that we keep each other in the know? And we outlined all of that. So that was that's how we sort of built it. And then we had to, pass it through our respective leaders. So, we had our CEO review it. We had Low Tokyo Community Council's board chair review it, LTSC's executive director review it, and they had to decide if they felt like it needed to go to their boards as well, but they thought, no, this is fine. And then we, signed on board and agreed to it. But we honestly, we're still finishing it because so much has happened, and we keep learning more about, what kinds of things need to be formalized. Like even this with First Street North that I mentioned, and LTSC potentially being able to develop a large chunk of that land, was the first time that we actually got, a tangible development project that might happen. And we had never had to do that together as a process. And so we were like, okay, we in the cases that these things actually start happening, that our vision starts to become real, we also need process in this document of cooperation of how we work together, especially because it brought in departments that we hadn't worked with. It brought in the real estate department within LTSC, and we never really worked. We know them, but we never really worked with them. And so we need to add that. That's something that I need to add into that document so that for future developments, we have that formalized. So yeah, that is some of how the we put a ring on it. Yeah, again, communication, talking it through, making sure, we're not making decisions for each other or putting words in each other's mouths. Yeah, that's part of it. And then, yeah, we get to just pull it up and point to it and say, hey, we agreed to this. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? I can't see everybody, so I can't see if faces are like, oh.
I think we might be at a point where there's no more questions.
That's great. No, thank you. Yeah, and thank you. I see folks, you got the chat, the applause. Yes, 137 years. Yeah, I'm so, I've done many presentations, but not like this. So Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad that it was fun. So now, yeah, and please, towards the end, I'll put in my contact info. But we know that people are, anxious to have conversations together. I know that that's a big part, a really helpful part of these sessions. So I thought we could do a really quick little group counseling. So really, we're gonna just split up. Probably it's only gonna be 2 or 3 groups, just so that we can have more intimate conversations. And just to start, say hello. Introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, where you're at, what organizations. Thank you. It's now also in the chat. Help! We are all in crisis. Is there a particular struggle that you're in partnerships? Is it in forming a partnership? Is it in asking that potential partner out on a first date? Is it you're in this crisis moment and you don't know how to talk through these difficulties around budget or how to do this work in a pandemic? So yeah, please just share just a little bit what you're doing in your work, and then an opportunity for you to talk through it with the group and just listen, share, give ideas, talk about experiences. This is an opportunity to get to know each other and learn from one another's experiences. And yes, Vicky, yes, I'd be happy to share the document of cooperations as a template. So this is what we'll do in the breakout groups. We'll have about 15-ish minutes. Yes, 15-ish minutes. We'll come back at 10 minutes. Yeah, we'll have 15 minutes. We're at 15 minutes. I see some folks have to, if anyone has to leave, that's okay. And then we'll come back and just choose one person in your little conversation group to do a quick share out, just sharing one story, one struggle or solution to share with the group, or something that you think might be helpful for others to hear. And that's it. We'll wrap up after this little group conversation. I'll hop around into the group just to, if you have any other questions or thoughts, or just to listen in, have a little peek. But the questions, the prompts are in the chat. So here we go. Golly, if you could take us away into little breakout groups. Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, I know you have to leave. I saw in the chat. You're muted, but yes. Oh, here, let me put my contact info in the, obviously it'll be shared, but
That's cool. Thank you.
Callie, can you put Yarlene in a group?
oh
Yeah, I can go in quickly, then I have to go.
Oh, you have to go? Oh, okay.
I know, but thank you, Scott. This was great. It's
yeah,
nice
of course,
to see you in.
Carly. Nice to meet you in virtual space.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna disappear. So, you guys.
Bye.
Yarlene, if you want to, yeah, that's good. I think you should. I would love you to connect with Yarlene, Scott.
Yeah, of course.
One-on-one.
Yeah,
possible.
absolutely. Here, let me just write down. I'll just write down in case I forget.
Your hours,
Yeah, I would love. I mean, anyone that wants to chat through any of these topics and many other things. Yeah, I'm excited for the office hours and little one-on-one sessions. I'm just excited to hear.
Oh, we need to remind people that you're going to do the office hours, the next office.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course. Do we know the date for that? I don't know off the top of my head.
Yes. I can give it to you. You can go jump around into the rooms if you want,
Sure.
and I'll get that ready when you come back.
All right, I'm gonna
Gally. Oh, sorry. What was that, Gally?
I'm gonna pop you in.
Thank you. Yeah, just hop me around or whatever.
There's 2 groups now that only have 2 people in them, so I don't know if I should just let them be, or if one of you want to go in and see if they want to join together.
Who's in the 2 groups with the 2?
I just put Scott into the first room, which is just there were originally 3 participants, but now it's just Megan Wanless and John Davis as the resource team member. And then the other group, which Yarlene was supposed to be in, is Marty and Mark Johnson.
That's okay. I think just leave them.
Right.
It's interesting, Margie, how we have the same people coming back all the time.
Yeah, there were a couple new names today. I don't know if they stuck around.
Yeah, it's similar. It's pretty solid, like a solid group of people that seem to come back though.
That was so violent. It's just like, ah! I forgot. I did have one extra special effect that we didn't get a chance to use, which is the Star Trek transporter sound for when we go into the breakout rooms and come back. Like, so anyway, I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to everyone's breakout groups, but I hope, conversations were great. We have just about, 7 or so minutes. If one person from each group would like to share just, 1 or 2 sentences about, something like some key takeaway from your conversation that you think the group would be good for the group to hear. So take it away, folks. I don't know who was in where. So
I'm happy to share. Our group was started with 4 and then we ended with 2. And then Scott joined us, so we were back at 3. But I was just sharing a lesson that I've learned throughout this project so far is over the summer, we were writing an interim report or progress report to the Doris Duke Foundation. And in that typical way that, I don't know, you want to show all that you're doing and the impact and the number of people's lives that you've touched and anyway, and in the midst of a pandemic, that's hard. There are challenges there. And so I wrote the draft and then sent it to Larissa Fasthorse, our playwright, for her feedback and input. And she wanted to add anything. And her main note was like, it's actually okay to take a pause. It's actually okay to say some of this work cannot continue unless we are in person, and that the work will be better if we are in person doing it in the communities on the ground. And so like, you can feel okay to say that in your report. And that was just a moment for me to be like, oh, right. Like we're in the midst of a global pandemic that's impacting, our ability to do what we do. And so to state that and to recognize that, like, have a permission to pause, basically. And that then we know on the other side of this, we'll be able to resume. And then like in that process, be able to ask the communities, like, what do you need? What in this process, how can we be of service? And so anyway, it's one of the things we were talking about.
Thank you, Megan. No, I think, I got to pop in here some of that. It's super helpful. And I think it applies not just to right. It's not just to the funders, but to one another, that kind of responsiveness. And yes, like we have to do the dance sometimes to meet those grant deliverables and reports and things, but we also need to be honest and not be pushing these, expectations and goals that are no longer relevant in these moments onto our partners. Another group, thank you for sharing. Who are the other groups? I don't know who the other ones were.
Vicki, do you want to share on our behalf?
No, Vicki, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Vicki.
There we go. Okay, Catherine, go ahead. I think you said it.
Well, I just, Megan, Megan has to go, but she named this dynamic that I certainly have felt before. Just that like trying to get work going with partners and build momentum, you can kind of keep meeting, and then it's almost like you have to have the same, like rehash the same conversations over and over again, like everybody forgets, and then you come back and like get excited in the meeting and then carry on with other work and forget. And it's challenging because I think this work of building partnership, it's really invisible. And like Scott, you lifted up that it seems like you see the like time spent together and like listening to music and enjoying, like building a personal relationship is a part of it. But that you really can't, you know, it's an intangible, delicate, like yeah, it's something that we don't recognize. You can't see that in like a budget or like a workflow or something. But Vicky brought up a great point that I think does mitigate some of that dynamic, which is that in her network, they've got a person who really does do that labor of taking the notes, structuring the meeting so that they're coming back to the action items, and then like really just like having a project manager for that group of partners. So we were curious, Scott, if between you, or if it's explicit in your agreement, if someone is delegated to kind of like do that labor of like putting the cats.
That is me, yes. So as program director, yes, I am in charge of overseeing the partnership and coalition. So I mentioned in another group, we meet every month on a standing date. We always hold it. And, you know, I take notes with a column for action items, and then I follow up with all the things that we committed to. So yes, it is really helpful to have one person that's just in charge of minutes and follow up and, you know, making sure we're all staying on task. And and I agree. It was kind of a joke, this like, you know, loving relationship, but it is very relational. And it's not necessarily that you need to be like close friends with your partners, but it certainly helps to have some sort of trust and understanding of how you each communicate, you know, especially, you know, in our case, like and working in, you know, Asian American Pacific Islander communities, like communication is very circular and you have to learn each other's styles. And you're like, what are they trying to say that they don't want to say? So yes, I would agree. It's super helpful to have one sort of project manager, or in my case, program director. Yeah.
And even to when I think about an our town grant, like in an application, if I were to see that spelled out in a proposal and like a line item dedicated to that, I would say like, wow, they're really thinking seriously about making this partnership function.
Yeah.
And just to offer, like, that could be something that you really build in from the beginning, and thinking about how to structure and finance and kind of like source resources for really taking care of that partnership building work.
Yeah. And I saw Marty, you had your hand up.
I don't know if we have time, but Mark and I got to brainstorm about ways of accessing Wi-Fi for a community that has not a lot of Wi-Fi and internet, and McDonald's and IHOP and the library, and just getting them to make it possible to be in their parking lot, you know, instead of, and asking them to buy the equipment if they needed to do that as a partner.
Yeah.
And then we brainstormed about story nights as a way of bringing people together in such a small community, and maybe hosted by a couple people in the community that people look to. Maybe not the most famous or known people, but people that actually the community respects.
Yeah.
And have them be the hosts and do it online on Zoom. So
Yes.
those are 2 thoughts. And then just a really quick, like, this came to mind. We did 2 things, Scott, that connect with what everyone's talking about, but that is, we were lucky in a lot of our projects to have someone who could transcribe the entire workshop as it was happening.
Yeah.
And type what was being said. And it's a huge, wonderful document and recording to have and be able to, you know, however you use it, right? And then I figured out a way on a lot of my projects, and I think it could be work on Zoom. One way to get kind of an ongoing evaluation, but also create a reflective moment for the people involved, the participants, was during the sign-up sheet, they were asked to sign their name, but then to add a sentence about a way the project appeared in their lives since we last met.
Yeah.
And so that could be a sentence on chat, but it let people actually take that moment inside themselves and think about it, right? These are the kind of things that you don't usually think about that just happen, right? And it gave us a lot of good feedback as well.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, collaboratively figuring out the digital divide is super key, and I agree. Having different kinds of community gatherings super essential to getting to know each other in the community, and also, you know, showing up for one another's events. You know, like I try to show up to as many LTCC, LTSC things as I can, just to get to know their communities. And I mean, we have a very tight knit community, but I think there was one more. And yes, love the documentation, and yes, checking in with participants in the community. Those kinds of checkpoints built in. There's one more group, I think. Was there a fourth group? Maybe that was it. Maybe the fourth group is just us. Well, yes, we are at just a minute after 10:15. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this session. We wanted to shout out, so I, as one of the technical assistance resource team, I will be hosting the next office hours on April 14th, which will be 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific time. My plan is to kind of have it similarly informal, just show up. If folks have similar interests, you know, we can just all be in a room together, or we can do like one-on-one time together. Would love to hear, I just like even the little snippets that I had a chance to hear, such incredible work, and just would love to learn from you all as well. You know, like we have so much to learn from each other. Yes, so thank you so much, everyone. I know they'll be sharing, the team will be sharing some, you know, follow-up. I'll put, oh, thank you. There's my contact info in the chat and the SLT website if you want to see some more of our work. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much, Scott. Yay. And to everyone else who's on the call, we'll regroup at 1:45 with Mike O'Brien. Mike O'Brien works at the Village of Arts and Humanities in Philadelphia, and also has a